Today we're going to be continuing on the David Ferrie files. This should be part 6. Today what we're going to do is we are going to go over the deposition of Leighton Martins. So, who was Leighton Martins? Leighton Martins was a good friend of David Ferrie's. And he is obviously a co-conspirator at a low level in the assassination of President Kennedy. Before we start on the documents, let me just show you this really quick. So David Ferrie was most certainly in Dallas. Most people will try to fucking deny that he was in Dallas. He was in Dallas. He was one of 2 shooters on the grassy knoll. Here's David Ferrie walking through the railroad yards after he shot President Kennedy. Now, if you'll notice, this is a photograph of David Ferrie on the left. The idiot is wearing the same hat and suit that he wore in Dealey Plaza as he's wearing in this photograph on the left. Okay, so let me continue. And David Ferrie was in Dallas with multiple people, but 2 of them were his close friends, Alvin Beaubouf and Leighton Martins. Now, of course, when you go through the documents, he will say he was traveling with Melvin Coffey. That's an alias. There is a real Melvin Coffey. Melvin Coffey had nothing to do with the assassination, in as far as from what I can tell. So, in this picture, this is Leighton Martins on the left. It's Alvin Beaubouf on the right. This is taken like just a minute or 2 after the president was shot in Dealey Plaza, okay? So David Ferrie was in Dallas. He was in Dealey Plaza. He was a shooter, one of 2 shooters on the grassy knoll. And so were his buddies, Leighton Martins and Alvin Beaubouf. So, we're going to start today with this deposition. This is not from the Clay Shaw trial, but this is from the Eastern Airlines interview of him in reference to trying to determine if David Ferrie was a pedophile or not. Is there a date on this? Yes, July 12th, 1963, okay? So, before the assassination happened, Leighton Martins was talking to investigators about David Ferrie because of his alleged activities while at Eastern Airlines. So, let us begin. What is your name? Leighton Martins. What is your address? 136 General Gardner, Lafayette, Louisiana. Are you of legal age? Yes, sir. Do you know Captain David Ferrie? Yes, sir. Have you ever been a member of the Civil Air Patrol? Yes. What squadron? The New Orleans Cadet Squadron. Have you ever been a member of the Falcon Squadron? Yes, I have. Now, I need to remind you, the Falcon Squadron was not a legitimate Civil Air Patrol squadron. It was after David Ferrie gets kicked out of the New Orleans Cadet Squadron, the official one, which I believe was in Metairie. Actually, I believe that after he gets kicked out of that, he creates his own kind of CAP. I believe it was called the Fighting Falcon Squadron. And that's what Leighton Martins is now acknowledging, that he was a member of this squadron that was not an official squadron. Did you hold any position of authority in the Falcons? Yes, I did. Would you name that position and describe its duties? I was the adjutant. I was responsible for all the paperwork, files, records, applications, ID cards, the squadron paper, and so on. Was the Falcon Squadron part of the Louisiana wing of Civil Air Patrol? No, sir. Was it part of the national organization? The Falcons were an entirely independent organization with its own existence, its own rules, its own purposes, its own articles of incorporation, and its own activities. With what organization is it connected? None. State, if you remember, who were the incorporators of the Falcons? David Ferrie, John Irion, Jim Llewellyn, and Ned Mendez. So Jim Llewellyn. That's James Llewellyn. If you'll recall, in the Dear Bastard letter, he refers to Jimmy being over when they watch those porno flicks. That's who he's referring to, Jim Llewellyn. And Ned Mendez, were they members of the Falcons? Yes, they were seniors. What is a senior? A senior is an adult member over 21. Under 21, we call them cadets. So, obviously, to me, at least obviously, this is a fucking child trafficking operation being headed up by David Ferrie and these guys. And as we already talked about the connection to Bishop Hyde, who was a fake fucking Catholic priest, I think it becomes pretty obvious that that's exactly what was going on here. So if you have the cover of a Civil Air Patrol or some sort of cadet organization, that gives you a legitimate reason to be at the airports, right? So if you didn't have a cover like that, how could you justify taking kids to the airport to traffic them? You couldn't, right? And this will end up connecting to the Winterland skating rink later on, which I hope we get to rather soon, this week for sure. Because you'll see that that was a CIA operation meant to traffic children. So there was a massive infrastructure for child trafficking that involved, obviously, the CIA and these fake churches and David Ferrie. Were CAP ID cards ever issued to any members? Yes, as temporary ID cards until we decided to go independent. What happened to these temporary ID cards? They were withdrawn or recalled, and our own were issued. Is this such an ID card showing a blue card? Yes. To whom was this card issued? To John Espinen, who wrote the word temporary across the face. I don't recall. It could be my handwriting, though, or Captain Ferrie's or the first sergeant's. Was Mr. Espinen a member of the squadron? Yes. Here is a copy of his application for membership. Who had charge of these files? I have. Was Mr. Espinen a senior or a cadet? This application is for Espinen's father, and he was a senior, and Johnny, the son, was a cadet. You say the Falcons were an independent organization. Was this generally known? Certainly. How do you know? Everybody in the squadron knew it because we had meetings to discuss our future status and what we wanted to do. Besides, I sent out a copy of the squadron paper to everybody in the mail. Did Mr. Espinen ever come and pick up these papers or charter covering the Falcons? Yes, he did. And when did that occur? In August of 1961. How can you be certain of the date? It was at a time when Mrs. Landry was making it hot for everybody. I remember it because he came to Captain Ferrie's house. Captain Ferrie was not home. His boy went in and got the papers from Captain Ferrie's desk. Was this a state charter? Yes, it was the squadron's. In the year 1960, you belonged to the New Orleans Squadron Civil Air Patrol, yes? Yes. Did that squadron have a summer encampment that year? Yes. Where was it held? At Kessler Air Force Base. Who was in charge of that encampment? Colonel Samuel B. Davis. What position did Captain Ferrie hold at the encampment? He was Commandant of Cadets. So, for any aspiring researchers who are interested in the child trafficking aspect of David Ferrie, these are names that I would fucking seriously take note of. Honestly, I don't really give a fuck. It's fascinating, but someone else is going to have to pick up where I left off. I would incorporate names like Colonel Samuel Davis, right? I would find out where Davis was stationed. I would find out which, what did he do in the military before, being here at this encampment. I would dig into his associates, right? This is how you uncover these networks. What was the chain of command at the encampment? In other words, starting with Colonel Davis, how did orders or commands come down to the cadets? By the chain of command, orders would originate with Colonel Davis, go through Captain Ferrie to the individual cadet commanders in charge of each barracks of cadets. Who was immediately over the cadets? Captain Ferrie. Was a Lieutenant Colonel Christianese in charge? No. Was he there? Yes. In what capacity was he there? That's another name. A Lieutenant Colonel Christianese. In what capacity was he there? As a sort of advisor. He did not have any command function. Did any dispute arise at, it says here Keesler, but I'm pretty sure it's Kessler Air Force Base, that involved Captain Ferrie? Yes, it did. What was the nature of that dispute, if you know it of your own knowledge? Well, every senior that showed up thought that he was a commander and started issuing orders. The result was confusion. Every senior was contradicting everybody else. The cadets then complained to Captain Ferrie, who was immediately above them. Captain Ferrie said we should follow the chain of command. Then some seniors went to Colonel Davis and he told them the same thing. So they went to Christensen. All the seniors wanted to be chiefs and nobody wanted to be Indians. Were any decisions arrived at in this manner? Yes. What were those decisions, if you know them? That was that a bunch of us quit and walked out. Why was that? Because we got disgruntled with the Air Force. They had preached military courtesy and discipline and chain of command. Then Christensen wanted to turn all this upside down. A lot of the fellows thought that something was wrong with what the Air Force had told us about how they worked. We could not see how it was possible for Colonel Christensen to preach one thing and practice another. Do you know of these criminal charges against Captain Ferrie? Yes. How do you know of them? I was subpoenaed as a witness at his trial. There are no documents in existence pertaining to David Ferrie's trial, just so you know. Did you know James Landry and Eric Cruchet? Yes, I did. To what did you testify at trial? I testified that since I was a resident of Captain Ferrie's house, I had firsthand knowledge of the impossibility of these charges being true, the charges being the molestation stuff. After all, I lived there, and if anyone would have known, I would have. So here you have Leighton Martins. So what I'm getting from this is Leighton Martins obviously was groomed by David Ferrie from a very young age, going back to the 1950s when he was under the age of 18. And he knew David Ferrie all this time through the 60s. So here Eastern Airlines is trying to gather information that will show that David Ferrie either molested kids or had engaged in improper behaviors on company time or something along these lines, right? So Leighton Martins here is covering for him. And that's exactly what's going on here. He's stating that the end of the Civil Air Patrol, which, what year did he say? What is it, 61? Oh, this is 63, and it was before, it was 61, 62, or somewhere around that time period. But he's saying that it was just, everybody wanted to be a chief and no Indians, right? So, but that's false, because you will find references elsewhere that David Ferrie was removed from Civil Air Patrol because of the allegations of what he was doing with kids. And he was taking them on flights that were unauthorized by the parents and all kinds of just fucking inappropriate stuff. So Leighton Martins is lying here, covering for David Ferrie. Now, why is this important to me? This is important to me because it shows a level of intimacy, not sexual intimacy, just personal intimacy between David Ferrie and Leighton Martins. And remember, I've said this before, I'll say it a million more fucking times. The study of Kennedy is the study of relationships. Period. Fuck what happened in Dealey Plaza. The relationships between the people involved is far more important than any kind of logistics you're going to glean from fucking reading about what happened in Dealey Plaza with the fucking how many bullets and all that shit. It's nonsense. Irrelevant, really. All right, so how did you come to live at Captain Ferrie's house? My mother and father separated and our home broke up. My mother asked Captain Ferrie and his mother if I could stay with them as I had no place to go. Captain Ferrie's mother? That's interesting because that would be in Cleveland. Are you working? I am a student at Southwestern. Southwestern is in Hammond, the same Southwestern that Thomas Compton was at in 63. So Leighton Martins and Thomas Compton were both at Southwestern at the same fucking time. Interesting. What activities went on in the Falcon Squadron? Captain Ferrie taught us reciprocal engines and had us overhaul a couple under FAA supervision. They were passed. We recovered an airplane and it passed. We did metal and it passed, the FAA. We also studied mathematics, aerodynamics, and physics. I learned geometry in about 3 weeks this way. What was the object or purpose of the squadron? Most of us wanted careers in aviation. Either we wanted to go to the Air Force Academy or aviation cadets or in aeroscience. We don't have a very good school system, and this was the best way to get things we needed, but did not know. Captain Ferrie had helped 4 fellows into the Air Force Academy before, and we knew he could help us. That was why we went to him and asked him to form this squadron. So that's a total crock of bullshit right there. Total crock of bullshit. It was set up as a child trafficking front. So, moving on. That statement, so basically just shows, and I guarantee you the reason that it was filed in the David Ferrie file and not in anything associated with Leighton Martins, I don't think Leighton Martins even has his own fucking file. A lot of the files are missing. especially the stuff on William Seymour, who I actually found out is still alive, who we're going to be talking about that coming up at some point. But yeah, it goes to show me the relationship was that tight between Leighton Martins and David Ferrie that he would lie for him, and David Ferrie would trust him to bring him into an assassination conspiracy, which is proven in this photo right fucking here, right? So, this here appears to be a New Orleans Police Department supplementary report. 5th District, contributing to the delinquency of a minor, intimidation. This must be an affidavit in reference to David Ferrie's involvement with the tampering with a witness that we discussed a couple weeks ago, or last week, or whenever the fuck. So let me go ahead and read this as a refresher. On Thursday morning, August 21st, 1961, investigating officers received a phone call from Mr. Alexander Landry. Now, just a summary, Alexander Landry, molested by David Ferrie. David Ferrie gets busted doing that, and then he ends up trying to threaten Eric Cruchet to not be a witness for the prosecution, which is ultimately successful, right? He does, in fact, intimidate Cruchet, and that's what this is about. Mr. Alexander Landry, who stated that juvenile Michael Cruchet, that's actually Michael Eric Cruchet, is why I keep calling him Eric, had come to his residence on the night of Wednesday, August 23rd, 1961, and told of being contacted by David Ferrie. The boy told Mr. Landry that Ferrie was trying to get him, Cruchet, to drop the charges. Investigating officers immediately contacted Michael Cruchet at his employer by phone. Cruchet stated that Ferrie came to the store where he is employed at 5523 St. Claude Avenue at 2:15 p.m. August 23rd, 1961. According to Cruchet, Ferrie was with another person whom he introduced as a Cuban who had jumped in the recent invasion of Cuba, as Sergei Arkacha-Smith. Ferrie, as Cruchet stated, asked him to sign a paper stating that he, Cruchet, had made the statement to the police out of anger for Captain Ferrie. Cruchet also said that Ferrie told him that he would have to sign the paper or be dealt with by some Cubans. Cruchet told investigating officers that he signed the paper shown him by Ferrie because he was afraid. Cruchet said also what he told his parents about Ferrie's visit to the store after he knocked off from work, and later that night he went to see Mr. Alexander Landry about it. Cruchet stated that as he asked Mr. Landry to notify investigating officers. On August 24th, 1961, investigating officers went to the Paglia supermarket where Cruchet is employed, and a full typewritten statement was taken from him relative to the visit made by Ferrie. This statement will better explain the occurrence, which also describes the subject with Ferrie and another who was sitting outside the store in Ferrie's car. Cruchet thought that one of the unknown subjects may have been named Andrew. Correct. That's Andrew Jerome Blackman. Cruchet stated that Ferrie stayed in the store from about 2:15 until 3 o'clock p.m. And later, when Cruchet knocked off, Ferrie was waiting outside in his car. Investigating officers spoke with Mr. George Paglia Jr. of blah, blah, blah Avenue, owner of the grocery store. Mr. Paglia stated that, can't read that, lunch at approximately 2:30 p.m. He'd noticed two men speaking with Cruchet in the store. Mr. Paglia identified one of the subjects as having painted eyebrows, David Ferrie, which very much fits David Ferrie. Mr. Paglia identified the other subject as being about 20 years old. He's talking about Blackman. Tall. And then it cuts off there. Investigating officers spoke with Mr. Francis Paglia of 5523 St. Cloud Street, who stated, they repeated that paragraph, so let me move on. Investigating officers returned to the Juvenile Bureau and notified immigration authorities. Inspector Underwood came to the Bureau and was given all information about this matter. Inspector Underwood stated that he knew Arkacha-Smith and that Smith was an American citizen and that there was nothing his organization could do. At 1:05 p.m., August 24th, 1961, investigating officers received another call from Cruchet, who stated that David Ferrie had come to see him again. Cruchet stated that Ferrie and another subject had just left him after getting him to sign another paper. Officers drove immediately to the Balter building in an effort to catch Ferrie, but after 1 hour, he failed to show up. Officers returned to the Juvenile Bureau and called Cruchet by phone and have him explain Ferrie's second visit. Cruchet stated that he signed something that has the phrase to drop all charges in it. Ferrie told Cruchet that if he signed the statement, that it would keep him, Cruchet, out of trouble. Cruchet stated that Ferrie had someone with him with dark hair and believed his name was Andrew. This unidentified subject was the same who came to the store with Ferrie the day before, according to Cruchet. Cruchet also stated that it was about 12:40 p.m. and he was coming from lunch when he saw Ferrie parked by Cusimano's restaurant on St. Claude Street near Paglia Supermarket Paglia Supermarket, and it was a parking lot near a liquor store. Ferrie told Cruchet on his second visit that Ferrie, wanted Cruchet to meet Arcacha Smith. According to Cruchet, Ferrie told him that he could have anything he wanted for signing the paper. Ferrie also told Cruchet on the second visit that if he wanted, Ferrie could arrange to get Cruchet out of town. At 3 p.m., investigating officers received a call from Mr. Landry, who stated that he received a phone call from the subject who identified himself as Michael McLoy, a friend of his son from Houston, Texas. Mr. Landry stated that McLoy was coming to his house. Officers called Mr. Landry in the morning of August 25th, 61, but learned that McLoy did not show up. On the night of August 24th, 1961, Officer Jonow received a telephone call from Chief Warrant Officer C.R. Knowlton from Camp Leroy Johnson, who stated that his knowledge the charter held by Ferrie was forged. Knowlton stated that he checked with the national headquarters in Houston, Texas, and found that there was no charter for the Metairie Falcon Squadron. Officer Knowlton stated that he has received a number of calls from parents inquiring of the Metairie Falcon Squadron. Investigating Officer Jonow called Major Christian, who was one of the commanders of the Civil Air Patrol in New Orleans. Major Christian stated that Ferrie was at one time quietly removed from the New Orleans Cadet Squadron of the CAP. Quietly removed. Agent Stuart Shear of the FBI was notified of the current information. Investigating officers spoke with Mr. Francis Paglia at 5523 St. Claudio, who stated that approximately, I already read that part. This is a complete duplication of a page. All right, so I can move on. So yeah, basically that was a big deal because it haunted David Ferrie for years. So he basically, Al Sheremy stays at his house one night. I'm sure a lot of nights. Al Sheremy wakes up in the middle of the night and David Ferrie is naked on top of him, jerking him off, right? He ends up coming forward to the police with that information. There's an entire trial over that, which there's no information on, right? There's not a single fucking document on David Ferrie's trial. But it goes to trial, and he's found not guilty of a bunch of charges, and a bunch of charges are just dismissed outright. Obviously, people pulled strings for him. And so what I just read was in regards to the tampering with a witness of Michael Eric Cruchet, who was Al Landry's best friend at the time, who he confided in what had happened. All right, so what we have here, Southern Research Company, Inc. This is more background information from the Eastern Airlines investigation. So to put into context, we have 428 pages in the David Ferrie file. Of course, there's probably close to 1,000 pages on David Ferrie alone. But there's a solid 150, maybe even more pages that are solely based on the Eastern Airlines investigation. Right? So fucking thank God for Eastern Airlines. We wouldn't know a lot of this stuff if it wasn't for Eastern Airlines and the investigation and the allegations and that initial trial. Synopsis. Subject arrested. South Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, 8861 and 82261, charged with carnal knowledge, contributing to delinquency of a juvenile, indecent behavior, and crime against nature. Charges still pending, but dismissal anticipated. Subject arrested New Orleans PD 21662 and charge relative to extortion. Charge pending in New Orleans DA anticipating moving to trial. New Orleans Retail Credit Bureau shows current residence for subject at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway, New Orleans, Louisiana. 2 small accounts for collection, 2 news clippings relative to his arrests, no other derogatory data. Subject employed as investigator for local attorney who represented him on criminal charges. Ferrie, owner of 1960 Ford Tudor sedan, bearing 1962 LA registration 300601. Car is being financed and last payment on account dated 9/26/62. 1959 Ford found registered. Okay, all right, here we go. Cars being financed and last payment on account, blah, blah, blah. 1959 Ford found registered to David W. Ferrie Jr. 11 Prospect Street, Alexandria, Louisiana. But efforts to identify negative to date. And screenshot that. Having a little conversation with Mr. Dawson over that. He seems to deny the fact there's a David Ferrie Jr., but there's your fucking proof right there. So, cars being financed and last payment on account dated 9/26/62. 1959 Ford found registered to David W. Ferrie Jr., 11 Prospect Street, Alexandria, Louisiana, but efforts to identify negative to date. Now, why the fuck is this important? This is important because in 1949, David Ferrie lived in Tampa fucking Florida, where he is alleged to have been married and had 2 dependents. So he either had a kid or he married a woman with a kid in Tampa, Florida, in 49. Remember, in 47, David Ferrie is seen in Venice, Florida with Clay Shaw at the fucking airport there that's later used by the 9/11 hijackers, right? CIA airport. So here we have a fucking car in 1962 registered to David Ferrie Jr. David Ferrie is never alleged to have lived in Alexandria. David Ferrie's father is not David Ferrie Sr. His name is like fucking Jeff or something. We covered that last week. So yes, this to me, combined with the 1949 tax returns, tells me there's a mini David Ferrie fucking running around. And based on the years, the guy's probably in his 70s. He's probably still fucking alive, and he probably has kids. So there's probably a David Ferrie III around somewhere. I challenge anyone out there to please find him for me. Neighbors at past residences of subject negative regarding knowledge of involvement in activities of derogatory nature. Observation of subject after working hours 11/9, 10, and 11/62 reflect subject may still be associating with youths involved in instant charges. Instant meaning these charges. Meaning he might be still sexually abusing kids, is what this synopsis says. Investigative period, November 62, 1 year before the assassination, done by Southern Research Company. So yeah, this is a private investigation company. Eastern Airlines certainly hired somebody. They outsourced that work. So here we go. A surveillance was maintained at Ferrie's residence from 5:30 to 11:30 p.m. on Friday, November 16th, 1962 by Jack Oliphant. Ferrie came home at 7:15 p.m. by himself and went to his house. At 8:15 p.m., Ferrie and 2 men who appeared to be about his own age walked away from Ferrie's home and got into an automobile with 1962 Louisiana license 190718. Oliphant had been instructed to record activity at the house, not to follow cars away from the house since it was believed more important to determine who came to see him. This car came back at 11 p.m. and Ferrie got out and went into his house. There was no further activity. 1962 license 190718 is issued to Dante Moracchini, 1309 Dauphine Street, for 1951 Pontiac. Now, Dante Moracchini. Let's just take a second here and let me remind you, Oswald worked for the Riley Coffee Company. Was it Riley that he worked for? There were 2 coffee companies. I always mix them up. But Dante Moracchini was on the payroll of the Ryder Coffee House, okay, which was run by Jack Frazier. So Dante Moracchini is a CIA motherfucker for sure, because let me explain what these guys did with NASA and like Michaud. And anytime you see people in the Kennedy assassination going to work for aerospace or fucking NASA, these are front jobs, okay? At the fucking time, NASA was an intelligence front. There's articles, if you just Google NASA intelligence front, you'll find a whole bunch of articles on how all throughout NASA's inception was all about funneling money for black ops. And that's what they did. That's where the $400 hammer comes from, right? So Dante Moracchini was on the payroll at the Ryder Coffee House. Yeah, Oswald worked for Riley Coffee Company, but the Ryder Coffee House, run by Jack Frazier, was another CIA front where Kerry Thornley was often seen. But Dante Marrancini, now besides being an alias that is thrown around by Ferrie's guys, because Dante Marrancini is more on the outskirts of shit, he is one of 4 fucking people who left the Ryder Coffee House to go work for either Michaud or NASA or other aerospace companies. Now, I didn't really realize that making motherfucking lattes in 1962 was qualifying to be a goddamn rocket scientist, right? Well, the fucking reality is none of these motherfuckers actually went to work for these companies. What these companies did was put a motherfucker on the payroll, and then they had a legitimate paycheck they paid taxes on that then they would go off and do all their spy shit. Which is exactly what applies to like all the fucking front jobs that were the alibis for people involved in the assassination, like Sergio Arcacha, who worked for an air conditioning company. William Seymour worked for Beach fucking Welding. Lauren Hall worked for the hospital supply company, IAP. So you've got all these guys using fucking front jobs who are definitely connected to CIA. It's fucking hilarious when you really come to understand how this infrastructure works. But yeah, Dante Marrancini, definitely CIA connected, sent off to go work at Michaud, former employee of the Ryder Coffee House. And this connects directly to Jack Frazier, which connects directly to Kerry Thornley, and Jeannie fucking Hack, and like all those people. So the following investigation was conducted by Edward M. Davis, November 17, 1962. The following observations were made at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway, New Orleans, Louisiana. The observation commenced at approximately 6:30 p.m. At this time, the subject's automobile, 1960 Ford, bearing 1962 Louisiana license 300601, was absent from in front of the address. At 7:30 p.m., subject arrived in the above automobile alone. He parked in front of 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway and entered the house. At 8:25 p.m., a 1954 Ford Tudor sedan bearing 1962 Louisiana license 311641 with 3 boys in the car arrived in front of the subject's home. They parked the car and all entered the home at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway. Shortly thereafter, 2 of the boys left the subject's home and walked in the direction of South Broad. The driver of this car was approximately 18 years of age, 6 feet tall, slender build, brown hair. He was wearing an orange-colored short-sleeved shirt and dark-colored slacks. The second boy was approximately 16 years of age, 5 feet 8 inches tall, medium build, dark brown hair with high wavy front. Sounds like Alvin Bobouf. He was wearing a plaid shirt and dark slacks. Third boy was approximately 15 years of age, slender, 5 foot 6 inches tall, had a fair complexion, light brown hair, was wearing a light tan slacks and a light blue shirt. The latter 2 boys were the ones that left and walked towards South Broad. They returned at 9:20 p.m. and entered the Ford with Louisiana license 311641. At approximately 9:35 p.m., the driver of the car left subject's home and returned to the above car with the 2 boys therein, and they departed, driving to South Broad. They parked at a bus stop near Broadmoor Drug Store and on the corner of South Broad and Washington Streets. The second boy left the car and entered the drugstore. After a few minutes, he returned to the car and they left, driving north on Broad Street. The observation continued at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway until 11 p.m. Subject had no other visitors during that above period. The following observation was made at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway, November 18, 1962, commencing at 6:15 p.m. No activity was noted at this time. The subject's 1960 Ford was parked in front of his home. At 8:15 p.m., subject departed from his home, leading his dog. They walked in the direction of South Claiborne for a short distance, and then returned and walked south on Broad. He returned to his home at 8:30 p.m. and entered the house with the dog. At 9:05 p.m., the subject left his house, entered his car, and drove south Claiborne, turned left on Claiborne, and drove north. He returned approximately 9:30 p.m. No activity was noted at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway, and observation was discontinued 10:15 p.m. A spot check was made in the vicinity of Columbus and North Broad Streets, and a 1954 Ford bearing Louisiana license 311641. And the note above it, I think it's a Chevrolet. I can't really make that out. Was observed parked near the corner. Well, it's a Ford. I don't know why it would say Chevrolet. I can't tell what that word is. Maybe Cruchet, maybe? Maybe it was Eric Cruchet's car. Don't know. No one was observed in or near this car. Spot check was made at 1311 North Pryor, and nothing pertinent was observed. November 19th, 1962, a confidential source at the Motor Vehicle Division advised that 1962 Louisiana registration 197173 is issued to James R. Llewellyn. 1309 Dauphine Street, apartment 9, New Orleans, Louisiana, for a 1954 red Pontiac convertible coupe. Motor number P8ZA55916. Louisiana title number M776516. With a lien in favor of GMAC 2926 Chesty, Cleveland, Ohio. The car was purchased new on August 30th, 1954 from Tony Ditt's Pontiac in Cleveland. Now, the Cleveland connection is very important because that will lead us back to the Cleveland mob, James Licavoli, Leo Mosseri, and of course the one and only Danny Green, a.k.a. the Tall Tramp. And so, yeah, whenever I see Cleveland pop up in anything Kennedy related, that's the first thing my mind goes to. It says here Llewellyn's occupation is shown as pilot, but on November 22nd, 1963, he was actually a New Orleans rent-a-car fucking salesman. And he was a rent-a-car salesman for like years before that, so I don't know why it's showing his occupation as a pilot. It's a fucking lie. The following surveillance of the subject's residence was initiated on November 23rd, 1962 by Jack Oliphant and Charles Branton. At 7:30 p.m., a car drove up and a young boy got out and went into Ferrie's apartment. At 7:40 p.m., another car, Louisiana license 197173 with the note Llewellyn above it, with a young boy driving, arrived, and the boy got out and went into the house. These two cars and boys have been to Ferrie's apartment before on November 11th, 1962. At 8 p.m., a car stopped half a block from Ferrie's apartment, and the driver, about 5 feet 10 inches, 250 pounds, 45 to 50 years of age, wore glasses, got out and came to Ferrie's apartment. All right, well, let me read that description again. At 8 p.m., a car stopped half a block from Ferrie's apartment, and the driver, about 5 foot 5 inches tall, 250 pounds, 45 to 50 years of age, who wore glasses. Who the fuck could that be? Sergio Arcacho was bigger than that. I mean, taller than that. Not bigger, but he was taller than that. So, I don't fucking know. All right, he went inside, stayed 5 minutes, came back out, got in his car, and drove off. His license is Louisiana 327938. At 8:30 p.m., three persons came out and talked for 10 minutes. Then a young boy in car 311641 got in and left. Ferrie and the other male in car 197173, that's Llewellyn, went back into the apartment. At 10:10 p.m., Mr. Ferrie and the boy came out, and another boy was with them. This is the first time the third boy was observed. The two boys got into car 197173 and left. They got into Llewellyn's car and left. Ferrie took his dog for a walk. At 10:30 p.m., the same two boys came back with a six-pack of beer and went inside the subject's home. No activity was noted until 1:30 a.m., November 24th, 1962, when the two boys and Ferrie came out of the house. One of the boys, the number 3 boy, had some clothing with him. These two boys got into the car and drove off. Ferrie went back in and turned off the light. The two boys were followed to Nashville and Patton Street, where one boy got out and went to a 2-story house on the corner of 600 block Patton Street. Right side going toward the river. The boy went in the front door on Nashville. The other boy drove off and headed toward town. The surveillance was discontinued at 2 a.m. On December 3rd, 1962, a pretext interview was made by Ronald Hubner at 604 Nashville Avenue to attempt to determine the identity of the young man who was seen leaving Ferrie's apartment and going to that address on November 23rd, 1962. An elderly woman at 604 Nashville advised that the house was owned by a Dr. McCormick. He has no children, and there are no young people in the neighborhood except for the son of the woman who lives in 608 next door to the McCormick. The name of these people was given as Martins. Aha, so it was Leighton Martins, obviously. And the woman advised that the son is about 19 years old and attends school in Lafayette, Louisiana, and comes home only on weekends and holidays. The city directory was searched for Mrs. Martins, but of the 3 listed, none are shown as residing at 608 Nashville. On December 4th of 62, a call was made to Telephone Information Service for a phone number in the name of Martins at 608 Nashville Avenue. The operator asked if this could be 606 instead of 608, and when told it could be, at the number she said she had a Mary Ellen Martins, Leighton Martins' mother, there, but then said that it was a non-listed number and she could not give out the information. The following investigation was conducted by Edward Davis on November 24th, 62. The following observation made at 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway, New Orleans, Louisiana. Subject's car, a 1960 Ford, was observed parked in front of the above address at 5:30 p.m. At 7:30 p.m., the subject departed his home and left in his car. He drove to the Broadmoor Drugstore, corner of North Broad and Washington Streets, left the car and entered the drugstore. He was observed making a telephone call from the telephone just inside the above store. At 7:40 p.m., subject returned to his home and entered the house. The observation was discontinued. Approximately 10 p.m., subject had no visitors, no activity was noted other than stated above. So, I think we've covered all the juicy parts of this observation that they were making on behalf of Eastern Airlines. To me, the most fucking significant thing is the appearance of a car registered to David Ferrie Jr. and when connected with the 1949 David Ferrie tax returns showing he was married with 2 dependents, makes me really fucking curious as to where the fuck David Ferrie Jr. is and what his deal is. So here, Motor Vehicle Division, Louisiana Department of Revenue, shows that license plate number shown in front of his house to a 1962 Ford Falcon Futura. So David Ferrie ends up fleeing Dallas in a light blue Ford Falcon station wagon. But that Ford Falcon, they did some license plate swap-a-roo, so I really don't have any way of identifying the details of that fucking license, right? So is this the Ford Falcon that David Ferrie fled Dallas in? I don't think so. I think that one was actually a rental from James Llewellyn's rental company. The 1961 New Orleans District Attorney reflects that Henry J. Winkler, wife Maury, residing at 3228 St. Claude Avenue, also Henry J. Winkler, real estate, 3421 South Claiborne, Audrey Winkler, stenograph clerk, Louisiana Division of Employment, is also listed at the 3421 South Claiborne. In 1962, New Orleans Suburban Area City Directory reflects no alphabetical listing for Winkler. There is no listing for municipal number 800 Oaklawn Drive in this directory or in the telephone street address directory. So, yeah, that's a dead end. But remember, these people were just trying to track down who David Ferrie was seeing, right? What is this? Records. This is more stuff involved with David Ferrie and his alleged touching of kids and stuff. All right, so all right, moving on. A note from the Juvenile Bureau, February 18th, 1962. So, all right. So what this is more investigation into the extortion, meaning the incident with Blackman and Arcacha at the Paglia grocery store, where they basically threatened Michael Eric Cruchet, right? So that's what this is. I'm not going to beat a dead horse with this shit. I think I've covered this stuff for at least a half hour, 40 minutes. And all it does is go to establish character, right? It goes to establish the character of David Ferrie. Let's see. Yeah, this is the statement from John Cater. Interesting this is John Cater because in this circle there's also a John Carter who was associated with Clay Shaw, and that John Carter also happened to be staying at the alleged boarding house that fucking Oswald never stayed at. So just weird stuff, you know. Whenever I see weird name shit like that, it always catches me off guard. More statements of John Cater. Yeah, I don't think we need to go over any of this stuff. More Juvenile Bureau documents. All right, so this I'm going to read because this is a statement of James Landry. I think James is Al Landry. I think it's just another name. So when he's talking to the Landry, it says, "Did you ever spend the night at Captain Ferrie's home?" "Yes, sir, about 7 times. Who did you sleep?" "But he," and then the next word is redacted, "jerked me off about 3 times. "Do you know of any other boys that the captain had sexual relations with?" "No, sir." "Is there anything else you haven't told me pertaining to the activities at Captain Ferrie's home?" "No, sir, that's all." "Is the above statement true to the best of your knowledge, and did you give this statement freely of your own will, without threats or promise?" "Yes, sir." Okay, yeah, so that's Landry. Basically, that's the story where he wakes up and David Ferrie's jerking him off. And then he just happens to go on and say that David Ferrie jerked him off 3 times. Oh, so the first time he was shocked, and then what about the other 2 times? Right? So give me a fucking break. All right. So the next page statement of Michael Cruchet continued. It says, it's cut off, but it opens with penis in my rectum. Rectum, it nearly killed him. All right. So I'm going to skip that. David Ferrie's a child molester. I don't think we need any more fucking observation there. All right. More documentation on David Ferrie and his activities. Nothing here pressing. Report of investigation, February 15, 1963. More investigation stuff into Eastern Airlines. All right. So now we have some more information, more documents on David Ferrie. And as far as this weird church shit. So, date of investigation, February 15th, 1963. Subject, David Ferrie. Synopsis. The Most Reverend Marcia Christopher, CJ, M. Stanley, Archbishop Metropolitan Apostolic Orthodox Old Catholic Church of North America, Louisville, Kentucky. Jesus fucking Christ. How many fucking preamble names do they need in this goddamn thing? Kentucky advised that on the occasion of being asked to consecrate David William Ferrie as a bishop in the church as above, he, Stanley, learned from a friend that Ferrie had been accused of committing overt acts of unnatural sexual behavior, and on the basis of the information, Stanley refused to perform consecration ceremony, and on the basis of this same information, later took the initiative to excommunicate Ferrie from the church. This investigation was prompted by receipt of a letter dated February 7th, 1963, from Mr. Charles Carson, manager, New Orleans office, Southern Research Company. That's the research company hired by Eastern Airlines. 808 Maritime Building, New Orleans. Requesting information concerning action taken by Chancellor's Office, Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, Sacred Congregation of the fucking blah, 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 blah. Fucking Church of North America. God damn it. Just fucking, On February 15, 1963, I interviewed the Most Reverend Maria Christopher, blah. I'm not fucking repeating any of this bullshit apostolic nonsense. So basically, yeah, they did an investigation. They excommunicated him, but this didn't happen until February of 63. So February of 63, prompted by the Eastern Airlines investigation. Man, Eastern Airlines just took a wrecking ball to this fucking guy's life, right? I mean, it was warranted, of course, but still. More documents covering, more statements covering the Eastern Airlines stuff. This document here just goes over incidents they had with Ferrie and his fingerprints on file. The identification files of New Orleans Police Department were reviewed November 1st, 62 by Ronald Hubner, and an index card located which reflects a David William Ferrie, white male, born March 28th, 1918. Actually, I thought it was March 18th. I thought his birthday was the 18th, not 28th, but I'll have to double check that. Was arrested under police item number B790462 on February 16, 62 by patrolman Roland Fournier and Charles Jonow of the 1st District, and that Ferrie was subsequently charged on affidavit 173891. What charge is this? Yeah, this is all connected to his child molestation. Yeah, here it reflects that David Ferrie was listed in the phone book as a research psychologist, right? So David Ferrie didn't have, he was a smart guy. He probably knew more about the mind than anybody, but he was definitely not a PhD or an MD, and he had no real official training in psychology, but he was in the phone book as a psychologist. So this stuff I find fascinating, and thank God someone went ahead and did this so I don't have to. But there is a document out there that's about 5-6 pages long, and it's got all of the different license plates that pop up in the assassination. Well, actually, as it turns out, not all of them, but it's got a decent amount. Really good for research. This paragraph I find fascinating because of the descriptions of the cars. 1954 Oldsmobile sedan parked in the yard at the above address bearing 1962 Louisiana license 325644. The following autos were parked next door at Lakeside. 1962 Oldsmobile light green, 1962 Louisiana license 981261 Ford Fairlane. 1962 Louisiana license 212668 Ford Station Wagon. 1962 Louisiana license 212667. How the fuck you get that? Two license plates right next to each other? 212668 and 212667. Unfucking real. None of the cars were registered to David Ferrie. No activity of pertinent nature was observed at the above address on any of the above dates. All right, now we get into statements from G. Ray Gill, Carlos Marcello's lawyer and the employer of David Ferrie. And alphabetical listings in the Motor Vehicle Division also reflect a 1959 Ford is currently registered to a David W. Ferrie Jr., whose current residence is shown as U.S. Marine Corps. All right, let me fucking screenshot the shit out of this. There you go, Mr. Dawson. The alphabetical listing of the Motor Vehicle Division also shows a 1959 Ford currently registered to David W. Ferrie Jr., whose current residence is shown as U.S. Marine Corps. Ferrie Jr. is listed as a lieutenant in the U.S. Marine Corps, and his home address is on the auto title is in Alexandria, Louisiana. This car has motor number blah, 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 and bears 1962 Louisiana registration. More documents from November of 62 indicating Eastern Airlines continuing investigation. All right, so this is all fascinating stuff, but some of this just doesn't bear any real relationship to the case. All right, so here we go. This is interesting. What we're going to be reading now is from a summary of the case as of 11/19/62. And I just want to read a few short paragraphs from this. Ferrie appeared to be well educated, and in his Meister's opinion, had been educated in a seminary school. He advised the subject allegedly has a PhD, but this had never been confirmed. Ferrie had attended a school in Cleveland, Ohio, having a double name, which he could not recall. This is possibly Western Reserve. He advised Ferrie also allegedly attended Phoenix University, but this was not confirmed. He advised the subject organized and trained CAP cadets in 1958 and thereafter at New Orleans Airport, but had no authority to do so and had no charter under FAA for this activity. Ferrie was later reported to be training Metairie Falcons, a CAP cadet unit, but this also had no federal charter to operate. Lieutenant Meister advised that anyone wearing CAP cadet uniforms, unless under federal charter, is in violation of federal law. Lieutenant Meister advised that in September of 1960, someone unknown had stolen all the personnel records of the CAP cadet from a room used by this unit near the New Orleans airport. Interesting. He knew Jerry Walker, a cadet in 58, who at that time resided on Tulane Avenue just off Claiborne. He advised that Walker was now in the United States Marines. Ferrie wears a toupee, possibly self-made, as a very aggressive person, highly obnoxious at times, very influential with people. He advised that he had heard through cadet sources, whom he did not name, that subject is possibly a homosexual. Meister advised that he knew an individual, whom he refused to name, that had made the statement, quote, if charges against the subject were dropped, this person, would go to the district attorney and give them enough information to put Ferrie away for a long time, end quote. Meister advised that the records of all CAP units in the New Orleans area are maintained at Billington Air Force Base, Texas, under the supervision of Colonel Paul C. Ashworth, that all authorized units are under federal charter, and that any others operating other than those chartered are doing so illegally. Meister advised that shortly before Christmas 61, there were 2 men from the FAA Washington investigating Ferrie's pilot status. He advised he did not know the outcome of this investigation, but felt the results would be available to the proper authority. A confidential source advised on November 7, 1962, that Eric M. Cruchet, 949 Street, Mary Street, New Orleans, had addressed a letter dated October 20th, 1962, to Captain George Grenier, chief pilot, Eastern Airlines, New Orleans, in which he said the charges filed against David Ferrie were false and that Ferrie was actually being framed on these charges. The same sources also determined that Ferrie's present address is 3330 Louisiana Avenue Parkway. Another person who will know of Ferrie's address if he moves is Earl Prince, bookkeeper, with a Vermilion Boulevard address. It was determined on November 7, 1962, that all records in the New Orleans area on airline pilots are maintained at the FAA. Air Tech Center Building, Dowman Road, near the New Orleans Municipal Airport, under the supervision of Mr. John Powell. An attempt was made to contact Mr. Powell on November 7, 1962, but he was not in his office. His secretary reviewed the indices for the subject, but was unable to find any record for him. She advised that the local office usually maintained a file containing the pilot's certificate number, ratings, and all other data for the period of years after it was forwarded to the FAA. Harry Howard, attorney, 1807, Père Marquette Building, New Orleans, advised on November 13, 1962, that he represented Kerry King in charges that grew out of a so-called sex ring in Jefferson Parish. This group was composed almost entirely of juveniles. Mr. Howard said he did not remember the name David Ferrie ever being mentioned in that case. He went through his file on this case, and none of the juveniles in that case were the same as those mentioned in various charges against Ferrie. So you had an ongoing sex ring involving minors happening in Jefferson Parish at the exact same time that Ferrie was doing all this stuff. Were they connected? I'm willing to bet yes. On November 15, 1962, an individual formerly employed as an investigator for federal law enforcement agency advised he once investigated David William Ferrie in connection with Ferrie's involvement in missing person complaint, as well as an alleged violation of the law regarding the theft of government property. This source advised the investigation file is no longer available to him, nor is he in a position to testify to the results of his findings. However, the following account is his best recollection of the information he developed during the course of his inquiry. The case was assigned in August of 1961 following a visit to the agency by the parents of a white male juvenile whose whereabouts was unknown. Al Sheremy. Or Al Landry, that is. Although the source could not remember the names of the parties involved. According to the parents, their son had been associating with the subject to the point where he had convinced him to be disobedient to their wishes, and Ferrie had made it possible for the boy to run away from home to go to Houston. The parents said their son had met Ferrie through activities in the Civil Air Patrol. From information gained through discussion with parents of other children who were also in the CAP unit, the parents of the missing youngster had come to have serious doubts as to the legal status of the unit Ferrie commanded. They had heard that the CAP unit was without official sanction. The source advised that before any extensive inquiry was made into the boy's whereabouts, that he was advised by the parents they had been successful in locating the boy through persons associated with David Ferrie. Information was received by this source that Ferrie allegedly had taken and kept in his possession some film or movies that were technically the property of the United States Air Force. Inquiry was made to determine whether or not Ferrie was involved in the theft of government property. Now, I'm willing to bet those are most likely the films of the fucking invasion of the Bay of Pigs that it was testified to that he had shown at his home. At this time, the source interviewed the Air Force liaison officer for the Louisiana wing of the Civil Air Patrol in an effort to gain background information concerning Ferrie. This officer, a captain whose name is not remembered by the source, advised that Ferrie's association with the CAP is not legitimate, and as his removal from the group had been requested and effected approximately 2 years previously as a result of several incidents which occurred in the summer of 1958 or 1959 during the patrol's summer encampment at Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi. All right, so here Garrison compiled all of this stuff on David Ferrie and his dealings with juveniles going back 2-3 years, because it was important to as character development. So this is a big mystery to me. Alexandria, Louisiana. Alexandria, phone calls are made on the trip. I believe a stop is made on the trip to Galveston in the weekend after the assassination, but I really haven't put two and two together on why. So hopefully this will really give us some information. Alexandria, Louisiana, in connection with information previously developed through motor vehicle registrations concerning a 1959 Ford registered to Lieutenant David W. Ferrie, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps. Let me fucking snapshot this, Mr. Dawson. Residence listed as 11 Prospect Street, Alexandria, Louisiana, as well as reference to Susan Carden, P.O. Drawer 1151, that city, in a statement at February 1862 of Alvin Roland Beaubouf, Chief of Police, Stafford Reach, Alexandria, was telephonically contacted by George L. Risley on November 1562, at which time he furnished the following information. A review of his department's identification files revealed no criminal record or complaint filed for the subject or of David W. Ferrie, Jr. Neither of these individuals were known to the chief. He advised he has no particular problem regarding sex deviance in his jurisdiction. A check with his juvenile division failed to discern any file or complaint on the subject, Ferrie, Jr., Susan Carden, or anyone using the above names. Reich stated that he had overheard some discussion among members of his department several years ago regarding gossip to the effect that the individual by the name of Junot, who resided in the vicinity of Prospect Street, was a homosexual. No overt acts were reported to his department, and no inquiry ever was initiated in the absence of any complaints. A check in the city directory by Reich during the call revealed a Daniel Junot residing at 31 Prospect Street. Reich said this would not be the individual he had referred to as Daniel Junot, who was employed as a captain in the fire department and was personally known by Reich. Looks like there's some character assassination going on here. But it looks like they're trying to identify David Ferrie, Jr., right? New Orleans Retail Credit Bureau advised George L. Risley on November 15th, 1962, that a check with the Alexandria, Louisiana Credit Bureau revealed there was no record for a David W. Ferrie, Jr., 11 Prospect Street, and no inquiries received there about him. Yeah, so Garrison knew that David Ferrie probably had a son. Did he wonder if the son was involved? Hell, could one of the kids who was surrounding David Ferrie, have been David Ferrie Jr. under an alias that we don't know about? Ooh, just when you think there's no more mysteries in Kennedy, there we go. So I was hoping to stumble across the Galveston documents today, outlining the trip. That'll take a couple shows to go through. We haven't come across it yet. Which probably means it's best for me to hold it for the next episode. Most of this stuff here, we're on page 312 of 428. This is more background on David Ferrie, digging into the CAP. Yeah, they spared no expense in investigating David Ferrie between the years of 1961 and 1963. And then again after he died, right? Garrison said he was one of the most important people in American history. And I tend to agree with him. So I'm just scanning this, looking for anything relevant. Not really seeing anything. Talking about how James Llewellyn was from Cleveland, which makes sense because he must have known David Ferrie from Cleveland. All right, sir. More surveillance of subjects. And here we go back to more surveillance. All right, so I think I'm going to call it for today because we're not getting to the Galveston documents, and I thought I would. And we've already covered everything I want to cover on this Eastern Airlines investigation. So all you need to know is David Ferrie is a pedophile, and he was surrounded by kids who he was trafficking to George Hyde in the fake Catholic Church circuit, right, through the Metairie Falcon Squadron. All right, so that's what David Ferrie was doing before, during, and probably after the assassination. Yeah. All right, so let me call it for today, and tune in tomorrow where we will pick it off. I will go through this and I will find the Galveston stuff, and we will start there, because the Galveston trip is one of the biggest misdirections in all of Kennedy. And when you come to understand what really happened, your fucking mind's going to be blown away. So thanks for tuning in, guys, and tune in tomorrow. There'll be another episode. And hey, I'm going to throw this out there. Anybody who goes for a short time only, I need another 31 subscribers at kick.com/Corey Hughes. I need to hit 75 subscribers there, or 75 followers, in order to get into their monetization program. So head over to kick.com/Corey Hughes, sign up there, follow me, and then shoot me an email, corey@coreyhughes.org, and I will shoot you over a copy of my book pre-order package for free. All right, so thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow.